What's going on, everybody? We are back. We got episode number 108 of the Club and Sub podcast. As usual, we're brought to you guys by BetOnline.ag. For a 50% bonus up to your first $1,000 $1,000 deposit, use the promo code Club Sub. Tonight, you got me, John, at MMA Fox, Lags, at Danny_Lags. We're supposed to have Luke. His building just lost power, apparently, so he is going to come on the show if he gets power back. But if he doesn't get power back, it's just going to be me and Lags taking you through a 14-fight slate. Honestly, it's probably one of the better cards we've had in a while, including the pay-per-views, just from a watchability perspective. So I'm excited to talk about it. Lags, what are your thoughts here? Like anything in particular you're looking forward to?
You know, it's funny you were just talking about like the watchability and stuff. I actually think like, even though like there's a lot of wide lines on this fight, I think there's the matchups are pretty solid for the most part.
Yeah, and they should be the fights with the wide lines largely are fun. Like they should finish. You know, we get into them, but they should be entertaining. Yeah, so I mean, we'll jump right in, guys. If you like the show, drop a like and subscribe, please. We'd appreciate it. I'm planning to at some point, hopefully this week, but before the end of the year, actually get us on some podcast platforms, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's something I've been meaning to do. Have some extra time in my hands, so I'm going to get that done. But yeah, let's hop right into it. First fight of the night, we got Nicholas Moda. He's taking on Cameron Van Camp. Our current line here has Moda run. You can get him anywhere from -188 out to -250, depending on the book. It looks like we're seeing some Van Camp money. I have no bet here yet. But there are a couple spots I'm looking at. In particular, I'm waiting to get a book that actually looks like it's kind of weird. Like their under isn't really available in many places. The under 2.5.
I'm same with you. Yeah.
Yeah. The under 2.5 -150 is kind of intriguing to me here. Honestly, the under 1.5 at plus money is kind of intriguing too. Like Van Camp is really an unders type of fighter. You know, the guy has no standing defense. I don't think he is particularly durable, and he goes right into the fire. Moda, on the other hand, he's obviously the concern with an under here. He's can be low volume, but he's a decent counter boxer, packs a punch, should be able to keep the standing. So I'm interested in the under. I kind of think these guys are going to swing a bit. I'm also kind of interested in Moda. He's down to -188. I faded him in his first fight, and he's not someone that I'm like thrilled to back in the UFC. But the reality is, like I said, Van Camp has no defense. He's going to come after it. I really don't think he's going to get Moda down here. Moda's takedown defense seems pretty good. And Van Camp is just so wide open in the pocket. I think Moda's going to hurt him here early and hurt him often. Even though Van Camp could theoretically enthusiasm his way towards winning minutes, I just kind of think Moda's just much cleaner in everything. I capped this out at like -230 or so for Moda. So I haven't decided if I'm going to hit it yet, but I'm considering a Moda play and looking at unders. Lags, like, what do you think? You said you were interested in the under potentially too?
Yeah, I was interested in the under as well, but like you said, it's like I'm waiting for more books to open it because like it's for the most part it seems like it's -150, but then I saw DraftKings opened it at -185, and it's like, well,
it's more reasonable.
Right. Yeah. No, but I'm along the same line of thinking of you. I mean, Van Camp, his reckless forward pressure, I think it's going to get himself caught. I think Moda puts him down at some point. I'm looking to bet the under at a decent line.
Has Van Camp even been to a decision?
Yes. I want to say there were two. There were two off the top of my head. Yes.
Yeah, but most of his fights finish in round one. I mean, he's kind of like your classic unders fighter, He's going to go right into the fire and try to make something happen. So I'm with you. Moving on, we got a really fun fight here. We got Javid Basharat making his second fight in the UFC. He's taking on Tony Bradley. This line's been like all over the place this week. Got as high as -185 at one point. Got as low as Basharat -125. Currently, it is.
Did it really go that low?
I believe so, or maybe it was -140.
I never sucked that low. Wow. Okay.
Where do you have it up in front of you right now? I can't.
I got odds. I can read them for you for the rest of the fights.
Yeah.
So I got 160. Yeah. So I got 165 on DraftKings, 172 on FanDuel. I'll read them.
And what's the comeback you have on? Is that 145?
Yeah, plus 140. Yeah, we'll go DraftKings odds. So 165 and then plus 140 Gravely.
Yeah. So I I actually like Gravely here quite a bit. I am not. I don't want to say I'm anti Basharat. Obviously, I faded his brother last night. Didn't work too well. That was just a horrible bet. I faded him in his last fight. I have nothing like inherently against him. You know, the guy, he does a lot of nice things. Like his technique offensively seems pretty on point. He obviously puts out a decent pace. My issue though is still like the guy's fought basically nobody of note outside the UFC. Like his regional competition, including his contenders fight, were legit bumped here. Obviously, he won his debut against Trevin Jones, but like I think there's an argument to be made that Trevin Jones isn't quite UFC level. Like the guy got the first two knockouts of his career in his first two UFC fights, and since then it's been all downhill. You know, he is a horrible minute winner, a terrible wrestler. All he kind of has is, a tad bit of power. And Basharat in that fight didn't really run away on minutes, which is concerning to me. And actually, Jones out attempted him. But yeah, I mean, look, I am not a Basharat hater per se. I think he's got some decent skills. The problem is two things. One, I don't really like the way he presents himself defensively. We haven't really seen it taken advantage of, but these guys that slide out of the back of the pocket, like their head straight up and no movement, that's just not a sustainable style at this level. You know, you even saw in round 3 of that fight when Jones started kind of letting his hands go, he was touching him a bit. And the second thing is just we really haven't seen this guy grapple at all. We've seen him do some offensive grappling. We've seen him catch a couple guillotines and front chokes, but we haven't really seen him be forced to grapple whatsoever. And now he's fighting a guy in Tony Gravely, who's an excellent wrestler, a plus grappler all the way around. And even as a striker, Gravely he's pretty good. I mean, he's not bad. He's certainly better than Trevin Jones, and he has a lot of power. And so the way I kind of look at this fight is more the market's pricing this, in my opinion, as if it's a stand-up fight. Because I get it. I think the assumption is Basharat's a better striker. But like I said, I kind of think you have to project Gravely to have more success than Jones did on the feet. On top of which, Gravely actually packs a lot more power than Jones does. So I can't really get past standing minus 170 to minus 185, and that's under the assumption that Jones has or Gravely has zero success grappling. And I think a fairer assumption is he has a decent amount of success, given the difference between him and every guy Basharat's fought. And if you can say he has moderate success, lands 2 to 3 takedowns here, I think it's got to be like even to slight fave. And then on the other end of the spectrum, and the market's not counting for this at all, is there's a possibility he could have huge success. And if he has huge success, he's a big favorite. So to me, I have a big bet on Gravely here. I have 2.5 units so far. I might add to it. And again, I think it's possible Basharat's legit. The thing is, the market to me is pricing this as if it's a stand-up fight. It's basically pricing all of Basharat's upside and none of Gravely's upside. Whereas I think, we should be making an assumption that Gravely can have at least moderate grappling success with the built-in possibility of huge success. So, I think Gravely should be a favorite here personally until we see Basharat show he can defend takedowns. What do you think, Legs?
I don't really have any dissenting takes here. I'm with you as well. Like I lean the Gravely side as well. It just my issue with him is he just puts himself into precarious situations way too many times, and to me, it's tough to back a guy like that. And so for me, I'm taking this more of an angle of the under, the 1 unit on the under 2.5 minus 120. I think on the feet, Gravely, like you touched on, guy's got solid power on the feet. He's a bit hittable. But I think Javid, guy's got diverse striking. I think he could definitely touch the chin of Gravely. I think, obviously, like we've seen before, many of his fights, he could snatch up a neck as well. So, to me, I like the under here.
Yeah, that's fair. Were you on Gravely with me against Nathan Manas?
I was.
Yes, yeah, it's a hard one to unsee.
and the thing too is like rewatching a lot of these fights back too. It's like even the Simon Oliveira fight, like a fight where he's a massive favorite. He gets himself put into a guillotine early in that fight.
He does, but like he fights hands pretty well now. And like to me, since he moved to ATT a couple fights ago, he seems like he's made like pretty real improvements in like all facets of his game. I don't know. I get your point about Gravely kind of getting himself into spotty situations. Like I can't refute it, certainly.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is it's like you even look at his entire run up. Like this dude's fought everybody. Like the guy was fighting Marab regionally. Like he's fought absolute killers. Came into the UFC, fought Brett Johns in his debut. They have expanded. Like this guy's fought just such a higher level of competition and had his game work against just a much higher level of comp. So we'll see what happens, but I'm big on Gravely this weekend.
Yeah, I'm not hating the
Moving,
play because also on top of it, it's like
yeah,
the strength of schedule with Javid. It's like a
it's
bunch of
nothing.
record padded guys, Trevin Jones, and then bums.
Yeah, and it's like even Trevin Jones, it's like you look at his 2 wins, he got basically finished in round one of his first fight. Valia gassed out and got KO'd. His second fight, he lost the first round and then kind of hit a leaping uppercut and one punch Batista. It's like, has he won a round in the UFC? I'm not even sure, you know? So,
Fair
so
point.
we'll see. We have an interesting one after that, though. We have friend of the podcast, Jillian Robertson. She's taking on Mariah Agapova. Robertson, what do you got here, lads? Minus 145?
Yeah, minus 145. It looks like the comeback is plus 125. It looks like there's just been some steady movement, though, across the market on Jillian today. So it looks like she's getting minus 150 across the board.
What are your thoughts on the fight?
I think this is your traditional striker versus grappler, to be completely honest with you. I expect Jillian to have dominant grappling success here. My only pause, really, at like the current line is like Agapova's fairly strong-ish, like strong physical girls kind of give Jillian pause in general. So I think current line, I'm more or less happy with the pass, but I think anybody that got around that pick'em line, dog money when it opened, don't hate it. I think Jillian subs her at some point.
Yeah. Did you say you played the total or no?
No, and I think what's interesting about the total, and I guess we could touch on that, I think it's a bit sketchy. And I think it's like, even though like the narrative is like bet the under, like Jillian gets her down, she subs her, or stays standing, she gets knocked out. I don't know. I don't know. I just have a weird feeling that like she could ride her out to a decision if it
Yeah,
ends up.
it is kind of interesting, right? Because like Jillian kind of has like cultivated a reputation of being easily finishable because of the Barber fight. But like if you actually look at all her fights, she's taken some fucking howitzers in there and never quits. Like she's actually a lot tougher than she gets credit for. She ate a bunch of bombs against Cachoeira. Obviously, the Maverick fight was grueling, and she hung in there the entire way. I was interested. It kind of sucks. Like, well, it doesn't suck. Like, I had my brother and his family at my house this weekend, so like I had taped the fight and I was planning to bet it, but I didn't really look at it. And by the time he left, the line had blown out. I am not. I'm still thinking about it, but I'm not as intrigued with the line of where it currently is. I mean, I do think if she gets Agapova down easily, she's going to ruin her on the mat. Like it's if Jillian can get a fight down, she has a legitimately borderline elite top game. Like she's just very good from those positions, has good ground and pound advances as well. But like you touched on, the strength thing scares me, man. It really, really does because I don't even think her wrestling is bad, but she's so unassertive physically that it's like it's very easy to kind of just muscle her out of positions on the feet. And like the only I don't rate Agapova at all. Obviously, I faded her against Moroz. I think this woman has a lot of physicality and not a lot of skill. Obviously, reasonably sharp boxer, but what we've seen in the grappling has been truly horrific from Agapova. But she is strong, and I could honestly see the early portion of this fight. Her kind of keeping Robertson upright here and teeing off on her a bit. I was ready to jump in at this number, and then I rewatched the Battaglia fight, and that kind of scares the shit out of me because Battaglia has a lot of the same issues Agapova does, and I would argue Battaglia, even on the feet, is less threatening than Agapova, but she was able to take round one off of Jillian and was able to keep it up right there. Now, eventually, Jillian broke her, and I kind of feel like that's how this is going to go. I'm just like still trying to figure out how I want to like put a number on it. Like I feel comfortable saying like Jillian's 60% here, just because we've seen Agapova's gas is just non-existent. If she gets out of the early part of this fight, she's going to take over, right?
Yeah, I think it's just tough, I guess, to get past the. I guess trying to like add to your point, to get past 60 is just to see how often that cardio dump is for Agapova, which I think it's likely to happen if Jillian gets her game going.
Do you think she's more? I mean, obviously the Dobson fight, she cardio dumped, but do you think she's
Right.
more of a cardio dumper or a quitter? Like, and I say that because the Moroz fight, I don't know. She seemed to just kind of obviously she lost the first round clean,
Right.
but the first round she was at least trying to scramble, get up and stuff, and then it seemed like she just melted in round two. Like as soon as Moroz got her hands on her, she just completely snowballed downhill.
Yeah, I don't think she's got the greatest pacing, I think is the issue. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
cardio maybe too, but I think the pacing is just awful too.
Yeah, so like for me, so like you said, I am unsure whether or not I want to bet Julian at this price. I'm kind of interested in the under, but as you touched on this, it is a little sketchy, like as you said, because a finishing equity probably a bit lower than the market is crediting it for. So I don't know. I do kind of think Jillian's probably value just because like if I tell you it goes 15 minutes, you feel pretty good about Jillian winning the fight, right? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I hate how obvious it seems. I hate that I missed the line by 45 cents. I'm probably gonna pass, but I think Jillian should smash.
What I see
Um,
what's really interesting, if you have Bet Online versus DraftKings, obviously it's the only books that have the submission props out. DraftKings has her by sub at plus 150, whereas Bet Online has her by sub at plus 255.
that's interesting, and it probably captures the largest chunk of her win equity too in this fight. So I don't hate that. But moving on, we got Trey Ogden coming off of a really ugly debut performance against Jordan Levitt, taking on debutant Daniel Zellhuber. And honestly, I'm not. I'm tempted by Ogden, to be honest. I'm probably gonna pass. I probably am, unless it blows out to like plus 300 or higher. I'll probably pass. I do. It's funny because I'm not high on Ogden at all, and I think, reasonably high on Zellhuber's upside in the UFC. Like the kid's obviously huge, hits hard, fights at a high pace, very durable. But the truth is, he fought virtually no one regionally. Obviously Lucas Almeida's debut that fight aged pretty well for him. His contenders fight with Almeida, but he did show that he has no standing defense in that fight. And on the ground, the only footage there is of him is from like 3+ years ago, but it looks bad. It looks like really bad. Like he got crucifixed by a complete bum on Combate. He got controlled by a couple other guys for full rounds. The thing is, and like ordinarily, like, if those fights were a year ago, I would have sent Ogden like easily. But he's 23 years old and they were 3 years ago. So it's like he has to be better than he was then. And it's like Trey Ogden's path here just seems so limited. I don't even think Ogden is the worst like boxer ever, but I mean the dude got outlanded a distance by Jordan Levitt. He just doesn't. He is not a doer of things. Like that's as I like to say. Like on the feet, Trey Ogden just does not win minutes, and Zellhuber he's pretty rabies. Fires a lot of shots, keeps the volume up, hits hard. But Ogden does have a black belt. He's a decent wrestler. I have to project him to land a takedown or two across the fight, and so it's really guesswork here. How you're guessing how much better Zellhuber's gotten on the mat. Do I want to put money on this? Not really, but like if it gets to plus 300, I feel like at that point it's probably complete. The market's completely dismissing the possibility of big grappling success from Ogden, whereas it's there is certainly or not a big possibility, a possibility of big grappling success from Ogden here. But I'm passing as of now. I'll jump in if it gets to plus 300, but I'm not interested here. What do you think, Legs?
So I thought you were going to open it with me. I were hoping you were going to open up with me, and you were saying, it wasn't a pretty debut, and I was going to say, it was going to Lags. What do you think? Well, I don't think it's going to get much prettier here. Yeah, I think Zellhuber, honestly, I think he works this guy, to be completely honest. I don't think Ogden has much for him on the feet. In terms of the wrestling, I don't see it, man. I don't think his wrestling's all that good. I don't think this guy's very good at all. I think it's whether or
He's
not
not.
Zellhuber, and I think it's whether or not Zellhuber gets a finish or not. Because I mean, I lean to him getting a finish, but I'm just not looking to play plus 130 inside the distance. Like, I think it's a shit line.
Do you like Zellhuber? Because I actually, it's funny.
I don't mind him.
I think he's kind of interesting for 23.
I don't mind him.
He's a good
I know a lot of
athlete.
the comps. I know a lot of the comps this week, and it's a fairly square comp to make myself. But Ignacio Baja Mendes, people are taking that a lot this week. He's a long, tall, rangy guy, fairly hittable, got
No
power,
defense, hits hard. Yeah.
no defense, throws a lot of volume.
Mexican. I don't know if Baja Mendes is Mexican. I think he might be like
He's
Venezuelan
Chilean.
or something.
I think he's Chilean.
Okay, there it is. And that actually is a pretty good comp. I hadn't heard that, but I like that. I think that's a good one. Moving on though. Oh God, I can't wait to talk about this. This is like the worst fight on the card. We got Loma Luzbunmi. She's taking on Denise Goldman. Any thoughts here?
I thought we were having a Giles fight, which also makes sense for one of the worst fights in the card. But see, I don't know. What I'll make of this fight is, I will say though, a lot of people are liking the dog here, and I'm not seeing it. Like, not that I would listen. I've laid chalk on Loma in the past against Sam Hughes, but like, it's tough laying chalk on Loma. I get it. Her finishing upside isn't that high. She usually isn't blowing girls out of the water, but I think she blows this girl out of the water in terms of like technical striking. I don't think Gomez is all that good. And honestly, if any girl was good to get takedowns, I kind of think Loma could land some trip takedowns here. Not that she's going to get a ton.
Yeah.
But I think if anybody's going to have grappling success, it's probably Loma. So, I mean, all this money's coming in on Denise. Minus 210 on Loma, minus 200. She's getting under minus 200. I think that'd be interesting.
I don't totally disagree with you. I'd probably want a better price than that, though. Like probably like minus 150. Honestly, you know what's funny? I've heard like multiple people like talk about Sam Hughes boxing up Loma, and like, dude, Sam Hughes would be like a decent favorite against Denise Goldman. Like, you know, I know she's nothing special, but like Sam Hughes at least is like a well-rounded mixed martial artist who's fought a brutally tough level of competition. Denise Goldman, I do not see it. She has a bunch of KOs regionally, but it's like the classic Brazilian regional thing where the women they've been putting in front of her are absolute cans. And then she fought that woman, Rayon Amanda, in Contender Series a couple weeks ago. Amanda's terrible. So that was not the best look that Amanda was just landing clean on her over and over again. Like, fine, you want to tell me that Gomes, if she's in the pocket, is a better pocket boxer. I guess I could believe that. The thing is, like, Loma's got like 3 UFC wins at this point. You know, she does a good job of denying the pocket. She knows where her strengths are. It's in the clinch and it's in kicking range. And she does a good job keeping it there. I haven't seen much from Gomes to suggest she can get inside or keep it in her preferred range. And if they get in the clinch, she's going to get butchered. And to your point, I think Loma could probably land 4 or 5 takedowns here off of just like judo from the clinch. Yeah. On top of which, she's on 3 weeks' notice, no camp here for Loma, who's been training to fight here. This is not the spot to fade Loma. I more or less agree with a lot of the people who don't like Loma, but I'm with you. I think this should be pretty easy work for her in this fight. Moving on,
last
though.
Thing I'll say, that 12-8 girl that fought Gomes, that was a rough look.
Last fight, right?
No, that was about 3 fights ago.
Dude, she's had a bunch. I almost faded
the Russian girl. I think it was.
Dudikova.
Yes.
Yeah, and that woman and Dudikova has
had her back and almost finished her.
Oh, look who we got!
There he is.
Welcome to the party, Luke.
I made it.
Hey, it's only fitting the WMMA whisperer comes back on a WMMA fight. So, Luke, what do we got for you? Gomes, Luke, me. What do you got?
Any passionate take?
I don't really see what everybody's seeing in the Gomes girl personally.
We just said that.
We both just said that.
Really?
Yes. We both just said that. Yes.
Like I mean, I get it. She's young, she's aggressive, but like, dude, she got dropped twice 6 months ago by Milana Dujeva, who's a fucking judo girl. Like, it's not like we're talking about 2 or 3 years ago. Like, and if she didn't knock her out in that fight, she would have lost on the card. She was down 2 rounds. I also thought she lost the first round to the Contender Series check. How all 3 judges gave the first round to Gomez, I thought was insane. But I think her best attributes are just that she's tough. She's got some dog in her, and she's going to throw a lot of strikes. But from a technical perspective, I think it's a pretty large step up in competition. At the same time, I kind of understand where people are going with it because Loma's not a crazy finisher. She's not necessarily blowing girls out of the water minute to minute per se. So it's kind of like almost like a Brad Tavares type of situation for me, where I think she's just a much more skilled fighter. I can see, based on like optics and a few different things, this fight like playing more competitively than the odds indicate, but Loma still wins like a reasonably competitive fight at a moderate clip. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, agree completely. moving on, we got another women's fight, but this one's fun. We got Aspen Ladd. She is probably fighting for her job at this point. I would guess taking on Sarah McMahon. Luke, what do you think?
Man, I just came away like after doing the tape and stuff. Like I'm like, I have no fucking clue. That's pretty much what I came away with. I think there's substantial arguments for either girl. We obviously know Sarah McMahon's going to go out there and win the first round at a ridiculous clip, or at least historically, she's been able to do that. But can she just go out there and Russell fuck Ladd? It's kind of hard to say because we don't really have much of a benchmark for it. I mean, we saw, Sarge land some takedowns, but I thought, overall Ladd probably got the better of the overall grappling exchanges there. And at least, meritocratically, Eubanks is probably the best wrestler that Ladd's fought to date. But we just know that the collapse of Sarah McMahon can really happen at any time. And Aspen Ladd is really the last girl in the world you want on top of you. And we know how bad Sarah McMahon's looked like on bottom. So it's like honestly a scenario where I could see McMahon like looking like minus 300 even potentially in this fight. And then just the flip, or the switch flips. I messed that up. The switch flips, and then it's just all downhill. Because I think legitimately, if Ladd gets on top of her one time, I think it could be all over. At the same time, for me, it's like it's really hard to trust Aspen Ladd right now because her last two fights, she honestly, like stylistics aside, like she just hasn't even seemed like she's really interested in like being there or fighting. Like she just hasn't done anything. I don't know if it has anything to do with the ACL shit she went through in 22, but ever since she had that shit, she has looked absolutely terrible. And so if she's not going to go out there and be aggressive and try to get dirty in the clinch and reverse position, she's just going to let McMahon pot shot and then lay and pray on her, then yeah, McMahon's pretty live. But I think if Ladd really wants to fight, I think even if she gets taken down, I think she can probably sweep McMahon at some point. And I think she can land takedowns from the clinch potentially. So, but either way, incredibly high variance fight in my opinion.
Lads, what do you think?
So I'm actually leaning more so on that McMahon grapple fucking her across 15 minutes. And I actually played one unit on McMahon decision only minus 135. I think she has a large grappling components in this fight. So to me, I mean, like you touched on, obviously that collapse is there, but like John alluded to earlier, Aspen Ladd really isn't a doer of things. So
I don't know if that's true. Yeah, recently.
I don't know. I don't value Ladd all that great if she's not in top position personally.
I don't know. I bet the under here. I guess my view is like I got plus 165 on it. I kind of just think. I mean, when McMahon tends to go downhill, she gets finished pretty much every time. As Luke mentioned, she's probably going to look minus 300 early. But other than the Rousey fight, I can't really think of a fight where McMahon didn't look minus 300 in round one, like in the entirety of her entire career, pretty much. But yeah, I mean, look, I think Aspen Ladd's kind of getting – I can't really disagree that she's looked like a broken fighter across her last two fights. I was never particularly high on Aspen Ladd to begin with, but – one thing she always has shown is like good grappling on top and being a decent grappler on bottom. I've never really rated her wrestling game, but when fights do get to the ground, she has a way of like turning those fights in her favor. I do think if she gets, I don't even think it's just a collapse thing with Sarah McMahon. I honestly think Sarah McMahon is one of these wrestlers who's just gets really confused and lost when she ends up on bottom. And so like if Ladd sweeps her here, I think McMahon's going to be in big trouble. Ladd should have a big gas tank edge here. On the other side, like if it does turn out McMahon should dominate, well, I mean, if McMahon spends 12 minutes in top time in top position, there's probably a decent chance she's finishing her. If Ladd is that checked out that she's giving up like dominant positions to McMahon for 2.5 rounds. So I don't know. I kind of think, the under should be lined about evens here. Just, we have the historic performances from McMahon of getting finished, cardio dumping, and then historic performances from Ladd of finishing women in top position. It's like, if she's done, she's done. But if she's done and she's really checked out and doesn't want to fight anymore, then it seems to me like McMahon arm triangling her or finishing her on top is a reasonable outcome. So we'll see what happens, but I like under. Moving on, we got Trevin Giles taking on Louis Cosi. Lags, what do you think here?
Not a great fight, to be completely honest. It's your stomach really turns when you see Trevin Giles as a -200 favorite over anybody. But Kosi's just the guy that really has a round one of cardio. He's coming off a 2-year-long layoff, so maybe you could expect improvements in the gas tank in the overall game. But I'm just not a big buyer of Kosi in general. I think it should be a decent spot for Giles, but not interested in playing the money line at all.
Yeah, I'm actually happy Giles is -220, so I'm not tempted to light more money on fire betting him. In all seriousness, yeah, like you said, it's kind of weird because, like, unlike the other Kosi, who I think, based on the tape, was a more skilled fighter, but has less real athletic talent. I actually think Lewis has a decent amount of athletic talent, but almost no skills based on the available tape. Like, he's an okay wrestler, it seems like. Obviously, he hits hard, but this was a classic guy who just blitzed a bunch of bums regionally, got to the UFC, and then when the early blitz storm didn't work, didn't know what to do. But that kind of guy with 2 years off, I mean, he could get a lot better. He should get a lot better. He's very young. He should be a lot better than I saw him. I think Trevin Giles should be a lot better, like no question. But also, at this point, I've learned my lesson with Trevin Giles. The guy tends to melt under adversity, and Louis Cosi seems like the kind of guy who could cause Trevin Giles to melt. I've seen some takes on under here, but even that, I looked at it myself, and like my concern is, Cosi may be the guy that's going to throw himself at you, but Trevin Giles is not the guy that's going to bite the mouthpiece. He's more likely to just try to dive on legs or clinch up. Like, Trevin Giles is just, he is not built different, so to speak. Trevin Giles is not going to engage Louis Cosi in a brawl. But yeah, in terms of the fight, look, Giles is way more tested. On paper, he should have way more tools. There's a very good chance he looks like a big favorite here, but I have no interest. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, pretty big pass spot for me too. I can't lay over 2-1 on Trevin Giles. I just can't do it. And then, I mean, if you're betting Cosi, like, I don't hate it in the sense that you kind of have to know what you're getting into, though. You're just kind of playing into the Giles collapse and he's going to go ape shit for 5 minutes and hopefully he gets him out of there. Or, to your point, he could have made cardio improvements in that time frame, because it is only a 1-fight sample, right? Where we have seen him gas. It's not like we have.
And he sold out hard for the finish in that fight too.
Yeah, so I'm not like really willing to say that the guy's necessarily a gasser yet. I would want a bigger sample. So from some perspective, I would probably be more inclined to take a shot on Cosi, but I'm good.
Do you guys think, like, I don't want to stay too long, obviously, but like I do also kind of feel like Cosi just being a better wrestler than Giles is like a very, very like live outcome here. Like, is that a crazy take? No? Okay. Yeah. we don't
personally, I don't mind the under 2.5. I think that's probably a decent
what's the number on it?
I think the last time I saw was 140, but let me look again.
It's actually not terrible. I thought the under was 1.5 here.
Yeah, so it's only on Betway, but it's -138.
Dude, like, no, okay, 2.5. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't mind that. I was gonna say, because like I'm not.
Yeah, not the one.
Trevin Giles is not the guy, like I said, not the guy that's gonna steer into chaos for a 1.5. But 2.5, that's not bad. Gives you more than enough time for either Cosi to gas out or Giles to just melt. So we'll see. Moving on, we got a good fight here though. We got Damon Jackson taking on Pat Sabatini. Honestly, it's kind of weird because like, I'm tempted by Jackson. He's certainly more proven, but at the same time, like I've criminally underrated Sabatini like throughout his run thus far in the UFC, and so I'm a little like scarred by it. I haven't even really. I think I bet Emmers against him. I haven't bet anybody else against him, but every fight I've expected, him to not dominate as much as he's proven to dominate them. I don't know, because like you could I think make a reasonable case for Jackson being a favorite, but like I think he's the better striker. I think if Jackson gets the top position, he can probably hold Sabatini down. Sabatini does play guard, and I think his chances of sweeping Jackson are pretty minimal. But on the other side of that, the one thing I kept looking for was trying to find some evidence of Jackson defending takedowns himself, because I do kind of think like Sabatini's top game is quite good. His back take ability is quite good. And I just couldn't find a lot. Like the only guy who's had big grappling success against Jackson is Bektic. And first of all, it's hard to kind of compare Bektic and Sabatini just because, I mean, Bektic is one of the two best wrestlers in the 145-pound division's history, and also just not a jiu-jitsu guy. And the second thing is that fight, he didn't even really try to defend Bektic's takedowns. He was just fishing for the guillotine all fight. And I don't know if that's a product of the fact that he was scared of, not scared, but knew that he kind of needed to finish Bektic, and so it was like a one-off thing, or if that's just going to kind of be his default in the future when guys try to take him down. Because if he does get put on bottom against Sabatini, I certainly wouldn't be comfortable there. All that said, I might play Jackson just because I kind of think you have to build in a lot of uncertainty on both sides there with respect to the grappling. But I don't know. Like I don't know. I haven't done well with Sabatini fights and predicting them. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I took a shot on Jackson at like 175. I think Sabatini being lined like a slight favorite makes sense, but like, I don't know. It's just a spot where I thought the line's wide. And it probably plays it out as a competitive fight. I mean, we just haven't, to your point, there's not a ton of evidence for both guys like having to stuff a ton of takedowns or defensively wrestle or be on bottom a lot. They're primary, top players. That's how what their whole careers have been predicated on. And both striking in a lot of ways is wishy-washy. I would say there's obviously some more durability concerns on the side of Jackson. He's also bigger, longer, and I also think he throws more volume. We have seen Sabatini hurt a couple guys in recent years, though, which I think is kind of interesting. But I don't know, man. I think it's going to be – I don't want to make that claim either. Like maybe it is a case where one guy is just definitively better than the other one, and he just washes him in that area. But I don't really see it. I think it's going to be like a back and forth, up-down scrambler type of affair, submission attempts where – you're giving me one guy at plus 175 in that, who I think, Jackson is probably the best grappler, like wrestler-grappler combo archetype that Sabatini's fought to date. So more of a kind of a show me spot here, at least should, at the time I bet it, does Sabatini deserve to be a 2-1 favorite over Damon Jackson? And I kind of just sided with no on that.
Yeah, so that thing you mentioned though about one guy being the thing, that's kind of like my fear. And like because I don't feel like I have the best room in the grappling. And grappling tends to be like so binary. If it does turn out one guy is definitively better, they're going to look absolutely dominant, in the fight. Lags, what do you think on it?
I'm gonna side a little bit more on the Sabatini side. Not that I'm hating the Jackson side. I don't mind the pokes on it. It's just that I feel like the pace and the positional grappling of Sabatini is that good. It's interesting though, because Jackson's never lost a decision. All of his losses have been by finish. So is Pat Sabatini going to be, just going to finish him again on this large stretch of decisions that he's been on? I think that's kind of quite interesting. I don't know. I think, like Luke said, I guess it's more of a show me type spot, and I just have no real interest. I kind of think Sabatini, decent favorites, more so justified.
Yeah, fair. Moving on, we got a really cool matchup here. Two of my favorite fighters at 185. We got Anthony Puffy Hernandez taking on Marc-Andre Barrio. Luke, what do you think of this fight?
Yeah, we've been big Barrio supporters on this podcast for a while. After I did the tape on it, I think it's a competitive fight, but I think it's probably lined about correctly with Fluffy about 60 to 65-ish. I think that probably makes sense. Just because Barrio, I mean, we know what we're getting with Barrio, the big brooding go forward guy, largely pretty durable outside of the Mimi, cheaty shit or whatever. But and a guy in general who at least recently has improved, his takedown defense and his get-up game. He's got good cardio. But in that stretch of kind of recent wins, he still hasn't faced a ridiculous wrestling or grappling threat, and that's something that Fluffy's pretty consistent to pursue. And him going out there and doing what he did to Frumd, I thought was pretty impressive. Not that I'm like the biggest fan of Frumd in the world, but I didn't, at least pre-fight, didn't think that that was how it was going to be largely that dominant from him. So yeah, I think that's just where the dynamic is a little interesting. I think Fluffy's just kind of force action, and I don't necessarily know if Barrio is going to be able to just kind of get off on his historic game here. So I think kind of Fluffy edges it out like 29-28.
Lax, how about you?
Yeah, to me, not obviously the same dynamic, but it's a little bit to the same of the last fight for me. Like, the line's about right, and I feel like the pace and the grappling of Hernandez is going to be enough to get him a decision win here and just be able to outwork Barrio down the stretch. But I wouldn't shock me if Barrio gets a KO here standing. Like, Hernandez does not react well to attritional work, and Barrio's a guy who does do that in spades. So I think it's interesting in terms of like an over-under perspective. I think the under might not be a bad look, but I'm staying away.
Yeah, fair. You know what's funny about Fluffy Hernandez? One of our first podcasts ever, I think I had like 4 units on Fluffy against Kevin Holland and Evans. And Luke came on here, was like, literally on the podcast, was like, are you crazy? Like, why would you go that big? And of course, he got nuked out in round 1. This is before everybody realized Kevin Holland can't wrestle. I feel like the Frem fight got completely justified, like my feeling on that fight. Just a quick anecdote. Yeah, I mean, I think both your takes are largely right here. You know, I have kind of rated, I do think Barrio's got a good get-up game, but taping his grappling, like, this guy's easy to get down, man. I really think so. You know, I know he stops a lot of takedowns against Jocko, but Jocko, you know, Jocko's good from top position, but Jocko's not much of a wrestler, though, you know. Park got him down a bunch. Andrew Sanchez won round 3 against him. Literally took him down and held him down in round 3 of that fight. It was hard to believe, to be honest. And Fluffy's a good wrestler, man. And the guy's got absolute pace. You know, he's had pace forever. He fought Brandon Allen for an LFA title over 5 rounds and absolutely whooped him on the mat for pretty much the entirety of 25 minutes. Obviously, you know, you kind of saw him come and realize his abilities last fight in the Frem fight to the best that we've seen. You know, I was kind of tempted to bet it. My big concern here is just like, I know Fluffy's going to get a bunch of takedowns. I know Barrio can get up. I think Fluffy's going to be able to mat return him a bunch, but, you know, Fluffy's super weak to the body. Like, that's his biggest, like, weakness, in my opinion. And, like, it's not I saw him get hurt once or twice. It's like 4 or 5 times in his last 5 fights. The guy's gotten hurt bad to the body. And that's just, you know, there are guys like that. You know, Jeremy Stevens, one of those guys, if you touch him to the body too hard. Matt Brown, same deal. And one thing Barrio is very consistent to do in the clinch is rip the body hard. And I try not to put too much stock in like one technique or like one thing, but it is something where I feel like over 15 minutes, you're probably going to have at least like 2 or 3 minutes where Barrio has clinch control and is swinging on him. On top of which, you know, when they're in space, I don't mind Fluffy's boxing, but he's not particularly defensively sound, you know, on the feet. You know, his hands are nice, but he gets hit a lot. So I don't know. I think the line's about right. I just summed it up. I think 60-65% is fine. No real interest in a play here. But, I mean, Fluffy, if it goes the distance, he really should win this fight, to be honest. Moving on, we have Tanner Boser. He's taking on Rodrigo Nacimento. I have a big play on Nacimento here. I have 3 units on him at plus 185. It's down to about plus 155 now. I still think there's a trade.
It's even lower than that, John.
Is it? What's
yeah,
that now?
DraftKings has minus 165 Boser, plus 140 Nacimento. It looks like he's around that plus 140 line. Yeah.
I mean, I capped him a favorite. I have kind of similar thoughts to the Gravely fight here. I understand why people don't like Nacimento. He's super hittable on the feet. He certainly get nuked early in this fight. And but I do think like people are putting too much stock in the Badeau fight in some respects. Like if you rewatch that fight, it was basically like a kind of nondescript first couple minutes. He went in for a takedown, got deep on Badeau's hips, and then Badeau fell on top of him. I rewatched it a couple times. I mean, he got borderline put out by Travis Brown elbows to the side, which I mean could happen here, obviously, but he snowballed hard from there. Obviously, almost got finished in round one, but I kind of think a lot of that had to do with the fact that the guy was half conscious after those elbows. You know, maybe he comes out here and that's just a thing. And he's just horrible, and I'm wrong. But I mean, round two of that fight, he just came out, pressured him immediately, stepped on the gas, got him out of there. He attempted 52 distance strikes in the first minute and 40 seconds of round two, which is a pretty crazy rate for heavyweight. But the reality is here, look, we all know what the dynamic is. Bozer's the better striker. Nacimento's the better grappler. Bozer on his back is horrible. I've seen some people this week say, oh, Bozer got up against OSP, It's like, I know OSP's like cultivated a reputation as a good grappler because he's got like 4 Von Flue chokes, but he's a bad wrestler, and his top game is pretty shit if he doesn't have you in that exact position. So I don't put a lot of stock in that. And the fight before that, he fought another light heavyweight, Nalir Latifi, who held him down for about 8 minutes in that fight. So in this fight, he's fighting a guy, in my opinion, maybe Nacimento's top game's not as heavy as, say, someone as Latifi, who just kind of wants to go chest to chest and control you in guard. But it's a lot more dangerous. He throws ground and pound. He's actually quite agile for a heavyweight at taking the back. And that seemed to be in the OSP fight. Bozer's kind of only out for getting up. The big question in this entire fight is, once they're in the clinch, can Nacimento get him down? And I think the answer is very likely yes. Can he get to the clinch without getting nuked? We'll see. I mean, that's possible. But again, it's like we're talking about how the market's pricing it. The market's pricing it as if Bozer is more likely than not to be able to keep this in space, whereas I think that's kind of at the top end of his like outcomes here. Like even if they're standing in space, Bozer's a much better striker. But we saw Nacimento put out a pace. He's 29 years old off a 2-year layoff. Like, it's a heavyweight fight at the end of the day. Is he really more than minus 200 striking? Maybe. And again, it's like if Nacimento gets one takedown here, there's a very good chance it's a round or the fight. If you project him for better than moderate success, where he can get 2 or 3 takedowns, he's got to be a pretty heavy favorite. So in my opinion, it's like one of the biggest movers of variance in MMA is grappling. We know for a fact here, one guy's a big edge on the feet and one guy on the mat. You have to lead with the guy on the mat. Like, I know he's not Curtis Blades, but Tanner Bozer does not – his takedown defense is not good. So, I mean, in my mind, it's just very simple. Like, maybe I'm wrong and Bozer can keep it standing, but no one knows that for a fact. What we do know is Bozer doesn't have good takedown defense and he has a terrible bottom game. Nacimento is a mediocre wrestler with a very good top game and a bad striker. That dynamic, I think, should favor, the grappler. So I have 3 units Nacimento here. I like him quite a bit. Luke, what do you think?
Honestly, I have a slight lean to Bozer. Honestly, what kept me off, I guess I am a part of that one crowd. It's the Baudel fight is ultimately what kept me off of him. I mean, he went 0 for 4 on takedowns and was just getting bombed on by like one of the worst heavyweights in the division. Like, I don't know if his wrestling is really any good. Shouldn't he be able to take down Alan Baudel? Like, I don't know. That's just my thing. At least in a fight that we did have 6.5 minutes, he had opportunities to do so, which he could not do so. So I'm not sold that he just gets takedowns here. But to your point, I mean, yeah, Bozer looks horrible on bottom. So if he does get on top of Bozer, not really optimistic there in any stretch of the imagination. I know Bozer's kind of more of like a point fighter in a lot of ways, but the guy hits really hard. And watching Nacimento striking, he kind of just goes forward with like reckless abandon. He doesn't move his head. He has really no cognizance of like what's coming back at him at all. And Bozer has those hooks from hell. I think Bozer knocks him out personally, but I would not be shocked at all with an upset here. Like I said, I mean, Bozer's, terrible on his back. I definitely understand the angle. I'm not saying to lay chalk on Bozer. I was kind of hoping the books were going to keep an under 2.5 line around, but it looks like most of them adjusted to like a 1.5. But yeah, I think anything under like minus 200 on under 2.5 here, I think is a decent look personally.
Yeah, fair. Lags, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to add real quick. The doesn't start round 3 is like minus 138. It looks like on FanDuel. So, yeah, I'm with Luke as well. I kind of slightly lean Bozer. I kind of feel like that he does get a knockout at some point. Oh, lost John there. Yeah, to me, I don't value Nasimento's wrestling all that highly, and I don't think his cardio is that good. Despite the Baldo fight, Baldo kind of gassed after the first round. So I mean, I don't know. I just don't value Nasimento's wrestling all that highly. So I think Baldo at some point knocks him out.
Yeah, you mean Bozer?
Sorry, yeah, I was talking about the bad Baldo fight, but yes, I think Bozer at some point knocks him out. I think his striking defense is very poor.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I guess for me, it's like if you look at the Baldo fight, it's not like he didn't get in on a takedown. Like he got all the way in on his hips. Like if he doesn't get elbowed there, Baldo's ending up on bottom. And if you flash back to 2 fights before it, you have the Mays fight where he was able to just kind of rip him down from the body lock like, fairly easily. And like my big concern, it's possible I'm putting too much stock in the fact that OSP got him down so easily, but I did not like how easy Bozer surrendered double unders there, and nor did I like how easy OSP was just able to inside trip him. Like that's just indicative to me of someone who doesn't have, very good balance. But we'll see. I think you're both right. It's like it's kind of funny because I kind of think I feel like pretty strongly if he gets to a body lock, Bozer's going on his back here, but him getting into that range could be very, very fucking dicey, like he is there to be cracked. But, he's had 2 years off, so we'll see. Maybe he's made no improvements, but he is training at ATT. So I don't know. I kind of think you have to lean Nacimento, but I'm in the minority, so we'll see. Moving on, though, we got, oh, God. This is going to be a fun fight, but it's fucking gross. We got Alan Amadovsky taking out Joseph Pfeiffer. I think Pfeiffer, what is he at lags? Like minus 450 now?
So DraftKings has minus 425. It looks like most of the market minus 450, minus 500 for the most part.
What are your thoughts on the fight?
It's an electric fight. Biggest bet on the card. To be honest with you, I have 2 units on the under 1.5, minus 160. I think this is a fairly easy squash match, to be completely honest with you. I mean, you can give a little bit of credence to Amadovsky. Maybe he, his win equities in that first round, but I think Pfeiffer can either finish him standing or take the easy, smart approach, take him down, sub him, or pound him out pretty early. I don't like his defensive tendencies for sure, but I don't think that's going to be much in question here.
Yeah, I can't give much credence to Amadovsky, to be honest. Like, I had a conversation with somebody this week who made a pretty compelling case for, like, why they liked Amadovsky, and I get it. Obviously his last 2 fights got KO'd in 14 seconds and then basically KO'd and subbed in a next fight. But the thing that sticks with me, like, if those were the 2 fights he had in the UFC where he got finished quick, I'd be like, maybe it was just random. But then you have the Jocko fight where Jocko, as I mentioned, he's not a bad wrestler, but he's not a good wrestler. And he took him down with no problem at all and just grinded him out for 15 minutes. I just haven't seen any real display of like real MMA skills from Amadovsky. It's not like the guy has like some crazy good regional tape either. His regional footage is pretty fucking ugly. He's just kind of a wild swinger. I don't know what Pfeiffer is, but I think Pfeiffer's physical and he's a decent athlete. I'm not. I think the market maybe is too high on him just based off the Contender's performance, but he is a decent wrestler. He's a decent boxer. I think he certainly has the skills to be around in the UFC for a while, whereas I don't think Amadovsky does. I don't think the under's bad. I don't have a bet on it myself. Luke, do you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, it's kind of just a easy dynamic to understand what they're doing. They're giving Pfeiffer a lamb to slaughter. Amadovsky's on the last fight of his contract. He's been crazy inactive. He's obviously done nothing for the company. He's done nothing to sell merch. He's got no fans. Like they're just get out of here, buddy. So here you go. Building Mr. Pfeiffer. I am kind of with you though, John, that I do think the market is slightly overrating him. And I do think there is a little bit of recency bias, but at the same time, X's and O's wise, I think he kind of has Amadovsky covered. In this fight, outside of kind of like an errant shot, because that's the one thing I will say with Pfeiffer. I still don't think his defense is anything special. So I think Amadovsky could, go out, buck wild man early, and clip him. That's what he's pretty much tried to do, at least in every single one of his fights. So yeah, I think the under 1.5 is a decent look.
There's one case for Amadovsky here, and it is Amadovsky was plus 160 against Krzysztof Jotko. That's it. Like that's it. It's just a market-based case that the market's overrating Pfeiffer. But yeah, like you said, Luke, it's pretty clear a setup fight. I told myself this year I'm not backing people like Alan Amadovsky anymore, and I'm sticking to it. We're not going to do it. I think Pfeiffer's going to slaughter him. Moving on. We have a great fight here, and this is a feature bout too. So last 3 fights are bangers. We got Andre Fili. He's taking on Bill Algeo. Luke, what do you think here?
Yeah, I think this is one of the best fights on the card. I've seen a lot of, wouldn't want to say strong takes, but I've just seen pretty valid takes on both sides. I think there's a decent argument from the Fili side that this could be a good buy low spot on him. Obviously big letdown spot, like -3 something favorite over Brito. Hit Brito at plus 240 there. Let's go. But yeah, I think obviously the dynamic is somewhat easy to break down. Like Fili's the better wrestler. We know Bill struggles with his takedowns. Problem is Fili has never been a very good control wrestler throughout the course of his career. Bill's pretty scrambly. I think from a technical boxing perspective, Fili might even be better. But the problem with Fili is outside of his lack of ground control, he kind of gets into these sparring rhythms on the feet where he just tends to just not do shit at times. And Bill's pretty consistent to go forward and do shit at times where Fili will kind of go backwards and play the back foot. I know he went out there and absolutely, would shit on that take with what he did against Pineda and went out there and really got after him. I'm just saying Fili, he's just kind of wishy-washy in that capacity. Even in his fight with Jourdain, he landed a takedown in the first and the second round. Jourdain popped up quickly. And so he just abandoned the wrestling completely in the rest of those first 2 rounds. And then when he went back to it in the third, he had a lot more success when he committed back to it. So I don't know. I kind of just have always questioned the mental with Fili. I think he's just always been a guy that he's just never going to get over that hump. He's going to kind of always be your fringe top 15, top 20 gatekeeper type of guy, reasonably well-rounded, fought a ton of tough guys. But yeah, I just don't think he's ever going to crack that ceiling. Now, does that mean he can't beat Bill Algeo? He absolutely can beat Bill Algeo because Bill has a lot of flaws in his game. But I think if Bill can work up from takedowns, assuming Fili is going to come out here and proactively pursue a lot of takedowns, because that's not a guarantee. It should be, but it's not a guarantee. I just think Bill probably wins on pacing and optics. It's not a confident take. But yeah, I slightly lean him in the matchup.
Lags, how about you?
Yeah, I'm more so on the Algeo side as well. I definitely think this is your plant your flag type of matchup, whether you like the wrestling-based components of Fili's game or the volume-based components of Algeo's game. Yeah, I think more so I lean on the Algeo side because I do think, like Luke said, even though Fili will potentially attempt takedowns, I don't think he's a great control wrestler. So I don't know. Either way, I do think this ends up being a very, very close fight at the end of the day. So I don't think you could have a ton of confidence playing either side.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on it, which means I'm probably not going to bet it. I actually have
bet it then. Yeah.
I almost have the inverse take to Luke here, whereas I agree with you guys. I think Fili could hit 7-8 takedowns in theory. My concern with Fili pursuing that game plan is dude, Bill's a lot fucking bigger than him, man. And if he gets tied up in close quarters, I don't think Fili has almost any upside to do anything with those takedowns, whereas he could end up putting himself in a lot of danger and ending up with Algeo on his back or in a dominant position on the mat. On the feet, in theory, I don't think anybody's going to dispute, right, that Fili's a better technical striker than this guy, right? I mean, in theory, he should be able to just stick a jab in his face all day here. Calf kick should be available. On paper, Algeo plays pretty much directly into all of Andre Fili's strengths, both as a striker. But like Luke said, the volume there for Algeo is there. And my big concern, it's I was going back through his career, man. The guy hasn't performed well in high volume fights. For whatever. Now, I mean, obviously some context needs to be brought in there. It's losing to Calvin Kattar at the time seemed bad, but in hindsight, not a bad loss at all, right? Michael Johnson, not a fight he should have lost, but again, it's like losing a striking fight to Michael Johnson. How upset can you get with him? But the Jourdain fight really like sticks in my craw a bit, and I think Jourdain's a better striker than Algeo, but it's like Jourdain outlanded him by I think 25 strikes at distance, and that is hugely concerning because he had. I mean, we just saw Jourdain fight a better version of Jourdain, I would argue, fight Nathaniel Wood last weekend and get diced up on the feet. That should have been a good fight for Feely standing, and he just didn't put out enough volume there. Didn't put out enough volume in the Yusuf fight, and so it's like I can easily imagine Feely winning a fight that looks like Lockney and Algeo, where he just lands the more substantive shots, gets off more damaging stuff than Algeo. But it's so easy for me to imagine Bill just voluming him up, and like I said, I could really see Bill having big grappling success if Feely engages in there. So I don't know. I think Feely should, on paper, it's not a bad fight for Feely, but the volume aspect of it and the size aspect from the Algeo side scares me a bit. So I mean, I'm passing it. Moving on, we have a really interesting co-main event here. We got Chidi and Joe Kawani. He's taking on Gregory Rodriguez. What do you think, Legs?
Electric co-main event. As most of the pod viewers should know, we're not huge fans of Chidi and Jokwani. But what I will say though is I'm not a big fan of RoboCop either. I think the guy's fairly slow, wooden. He's hittable on the feet. Guy's a good grappler, but he doesn't go to it proactively enough. I don't know. I think this could be a situation where it's like, well, maybe I should be on RoboCop, but he gets starched in the first round kind of situation. So I don't know. I'm more so lean RoboCop. I think he's got the grappling edge, but I think the guy's super hittable.
It's funny, when I heard about the fight getting announced, I mean, the market historically has been fairly high on RoboCop, and I thought we'd get like a big dog number on Chidi. And so I was thinking I might play him because I don't totally agree with you, Lags, about RoboCop striking. Like, he is wooden, I agree with that, and he is hittable if you get in the pocket, but like, the guy checks leg kicks. Not many guys in this division do that. He does have solid boxing. He obviously hits quite hard. But in terms of the grappling, I think, the market, or I thought, I'm clearly not, apparently, after Kawani's last two performances, but I think people overrate the grappling in this context in the sense that, look, RoboCop obviously is a great jiu-jitsu player. He probably rapes everybody he fought in the UFC, like in a gi. Like, I have very little doubt of that. But his grappling in MMA, I don't think it's very practical for MMA. Like, if you look at it, the only fight where he's ever really consolidated position is against Jun Park. Every other fight, he's going for kind of like exotic submissions that make it just very easy for his opponents who are much worse grapplers to get out. And I don't trust that. And Chidi, I don't think Chidi's a good wrestler, but I actually think he's okay at staying safe as a submission grappler. And to your point, I don't think RoboCop has the gas to push a grappling heavy game plan past the round. And so I was kind of interested in Chidi if he was going to be a big dog, but now I'm looking at it and like, I haven't betted. I don't know if I will, but Chidi's moving out to he's out to minus 128 on Bet Online right now. Like, that seems extreme to me because while I do think he's probably more durable and probably has commensurate amounts of power, like, RoboCop does have some grappling in his back pocket. I don't think he's going to be getting killed on minute standing. Like, nobody has really killed him on minute standing. I think he's got to be a slight favorite here. So I don't know if I'll bet him or not because I said I'm not super high on either guy, but I do think, the market's massively overreacting to Chidi having a 15-second KO against Barrio and, putting out Dusko with an elbow. Like Rodriguez is skill-wise, Gregory Rodriguez is, in my opinion, a lot better than Barrio and Dusko. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, it's another fight in this card I don't really have a particularly strong opinion on. Historically, I would say I've been lower on Chidi, and then with Rodriguez, I've honestly just pinballed with the guy throughout like the last 2 to 3 years of what my opinions on him have been. Despite his, him having a lot of success, I think to Lag's point, I still think he just gets incredibly reckless. Like, even in going into the Marquez fight, and if you told me or whoever that he was going to go out there and do what he did, I was like, well, Marquez is probably going to look like a great bet if he's going to go out there and brawl with Marquez, and then he just outbrawls the brawler and beats the shit out of him completely. But I still think, like, even points against Park, he did that before scoring that. He got hurt there, you know. I still think that's going to catch up to him at some point, especially against a guy like Chidi, who's pretty sharp, you know, has a lot of diverse tools in his arsenal, throws a lot of straight shots versus a lot of the hooks of Rodriguez too. I think, honestly, I kind of think Chidi knocks him out. But the grappling, to your point too, John, is interesting. Obviously, we know that Chidi's had struggles there, you know, pre-UFC in the past. It does look like he's gotten, you know, a little bit better. It's hard to really definitively say anything outside of his black belt, but that Carvalho fight just always sticks in my head. That just was not pretty. But then on the side of Rodriguez too, maybe I'm just salty because I had the fight doesn't go the distance in the Petrosian fight in the parlay. But, you know, him getting to Petrosian's back, you know, multiple times, it's like he got to Park's back. It's like he's not fucking submitting people. And like, I still think he's a good grappler, but it's not like, oh, this guy gets into dominant positions on you or he threatens stuff, you're screwed. Like, just hasn't really been the case. So it's like, to your point, I kind of question where his like overall prowess is as like an MMA grappler, you know, or at least from a submission perspective of how dangerous he is. Because I going into like the earlier portions, I was like, everything I've heard about this guy, he's legit or whatever. I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying in terms of his ability to secure finishes, I'm not necessarily as high. I think the fight being probably around a pick just makes sense again. No strong opinion.
Yeah, I mean, his grappling IQ is a bit like that Suloev stretch he went for against Petrosian. Like, dude, just lock down his back, you know? Like, if you don't hit that, you're losing position, which is what happened, and he lost the fight.
Well, and then even in the second, when he was able to work out of that and then get to his back, he ultimately, I don't know, I don't think Petrosian reversed him. I think Petrosian just stood up, but it was when he was trying to reverse or switch the lock on the body triangle. It's when he got out. It's like, why is a kickboxer timing when you're switching your locks on a body triangle if you're this elite jiu-jitsu? I understand it's the third round. They're sweaty. There was blood everywhere. I'm sure that actually played a decent factor into it a little bit. But, yeah, those exchanges, to your point, in the third round, John, still just I don't know. It leaves a little sour taste.
Yeah, they bug me as well. It's very strange. Like, you know, like to me and Maya, it wasn't. I mean, granted, I'm now comparing him to like the best jiu-jitsu player in UFC history, but it's like, you know, someone of that level, they're not getting out of that position, you know. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. Moving on, we got a great main event here. Corey Sandhagen, he's taking on Song Yadong. Prices have been all over the place for this as well. I see Bet Online, Sandhagen's down to I mean, he was at minus 180 earlier today. Then he bounced to like minus 200. Now he's back to minus 180. It's interesting. I pre-tape strongly lean the Song here. I came away post-tape kind of feeling the other way. I haven't decided if I'll bet Sandhagen or not, just because I do. I'm pretty high on Song Yadong, to be honest. I think he's a good athlete. He's very durable. He obviously hits hard. I think his cardio, it's looked great at times and it's looked poor at times. So I don't really know like what to make of it. But in the context of this fight, look, there's a lot. I faded Sandhagen against Dillashaw. I faded him against Sterling. But, you know, there were very real reasons for that. And in particular, the grappling. And let's be honest, in the Dillashaw fight, he probably deserved the nod there. You know, I was happy that he didn't get it. But, you know, it was a close fight, and I think he deserved it. You know, the market seems to be a bit lower on him now because he's lost, I think, 3 out of 4 fights or 3 out of 5 fights. But, you know, his last fight, he lost to Peter Yan. Like, how much stock can you really put in that? And, you know, it wasn't like it was a non-compete. He outlanded him at distance. He outlanded him to the head. He attempted 455 strikes over 5 rounds, which is extraordinarily impressive. You know, he's the bigger guy here. He's the longer guy. Very reliable, high-volume striker. Hits the body a lot, which, you know, with the cardio questions of Song is pretty relevant. So, like, I lean the Sandhagen side. Like, I like Song, and he seems like he's getting a lot better. And obviously, he's very, very young. Like, in particular, this 3-fight win streak he's on has been very impressive. But the reality is he hasn't fought anybody, like, close to this level. Like, Arce's a really nice win, but Arce is kind of like a fringe top 15er at 45, he hasn't seemed to have as much success. I don't know if it's a durability thing or what. At 35, the Casey Kenny fight, it's a nice win, but again, you're talking about guys who are nowhere near the level of Corey Sandhagen, and it's really, really hard for me to unsee like the fight with Marlon Vera, where it's like, look, Vera's good. I've again another guy that I've criminally underrated, but the reality is what makes Vera good is kind of his critical hit ability, his ability to damage guys. Like, Vera's rarely competing on minutes just strike for strike in the way that he did with Song. He's usually behind on minutes and using damaging shots to like sway the judges and whatnot. But with Song, he was right there minute for minute, which is pretty concerning to me because it's like, if Song is letting Vera go in there strike for him, I feel pretty confident that Sandhagen is going to get way out in front of him in the strike count. And so to me, that means Song has to have a lot of success with power optics here. I think he could have some success countering over Sandhagen's jab. He can probably hurt him at times here. But ultimately, when looking at it, it's like I kind of slightly lean Song on finishing upside. But early in this fight, I kind of think the first round or two is probably close, lean Sandhagen. But the later it goes, the more it favors him, and I'd expect the later rounds of this fight to be dominant. And so with that dynamic and the huge volume edge and the length edge, I kind of feel Sandhagen has to be a decent favorite. Like, if I'm looking to fade Sandhagen, it's usually with somebody who's going to grapple. And, I mean, Song Yadong's not going to attempt 20 takedowns here. So I don't know if I'll bet him yet. If the number keeps coming, I will, though. But I lean Sandhagen. Luke, what do you think?
I am pretty much right there with you too, because going into it, I thought I would be probably taking the shot on Song. And then I watched a lot of the tape and I kind of came away with a lot of the same things you are. Like, I'm with you as well too. Like, I think Song is an excellent prospect at 24 years old. The guy's incredibly talented. He's got one hell of a ceiling, but it also seems to me like this is like where the step back spot comes, where he just gets pushed a little too far up the ladder. He's just not there yet, and he's going to get that lessened. From a narrative perspective, that's what I think. But even stylistically, like, I can't get the Kyler Phillips fight out of my head too, a guy who was going to move a lot because, Song kind of needs to, largely play that lip of the pocket type of game with guys. And, Kyler didn't give that to him, and he severely struggled. And really the only reason going back and watching it, why Song was able to have success in the third round, that's because Phillips just gasped pretty much. But when he was fresh and when he was on his bike, Song had a lot of troubles in that fight. And obviously it's not a direct comparison. My point is that Sandhagen's movement patterns and everything is pretty unorthodox. But my concern with him is getting hurt, right? And we obviously saw Jan hurt him. He does leave himself exposed. Song's fast and hits hard, so Song could knock him out. But to your point, it's a 25-minute fight. Maybe I probably wouldn't play like 180 Sandhagen if it was a 3-round fight, but in a 5-minute fight or a 25-minute fight, this minus 180 number, like, I'm about to dip my toes in right there because I think I just think that's a bit short. I think that's a bit short, personally. I think it's a even though moderate chalky, but actually a decent buy down spot on Sandhagen potentially.
Yeah, I guess my question is like, it's like, oh, actually, Lags, you go first, then I'll ask. What are your thoughts?
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what can you assign Song KO here? Because it's like, I agree he can hurt Sandhagen, but Jan was hitting him with fucking hammers. It's like, I know he hurt him, but
the dude's eating hammers before from Lineker too.
Yeah, like I don't think a durability is like he's been hurt, but a lot of guys get hurt. Like, can you really put Song finishing him 20% on the high end, 15%?
I'm not gonna lie, Song knocking out RC was really impressive to me.
It was very impressive, very, very impressive. I agree. I think I think he's gonna be awesome. I think he is awesome, but like you said, it is a huge step up here. I kind of think the market's forgetting a bit how good Sandhagen is. What do you think, Legs?
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add, and that's why I was having you get in there. Similar to you, John, I kind of think that like the first 2 rounds probably a little bit close, but like the later this fight goes, Sandhagen kind of blows him away in terms of like technical striking, the volume in general. Like I minus 180, I think that's a good spot, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I'm hoping it comes in a little bit more, but I think
I
betting.
don't know. This is interesting. Like I guess not that it's quite the same, but let's say, for instance, like these same people who are backing Song, are you backing this same price if we have Corey and Cheeto, same price?
Oh, if I had Corey minus 180 against Cheeto,
Corey minus
I don't want
180
the
over
comment
Cheeto.
section yet. Do you really want me to make a comment on Cheeto Vera
Yeah.
right now?
Yeah,
I,
do
have to
it.
win,
Yeah, yeah.
I have to win a bet against Cheeto Vera before I actually make any more comments about Cheeto Vera. Because again, it's like that's someone I've like horrendously underrated throughout his career. So, but no, I mean, like Corey, I would probably favor moderately against anybody in the division other than Jan and Sterling, right? I mean, I can't think of. I mean, I guess there's like matchup specific guys like Marab or Simone where it's like, yeah, I would favor them against him, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
But yeah, so I think it's going to be a great card this weekend. I'm really looking forward to it. Pumped to get at it, and then obviously, do we even have lines up for next week yet or no? No, it doesn't look. Oh yeah, we do. Next week's an okay card, but we'll be back here same time, Wednesday, 10 p.m. Eastern. Guys, if you like the show, please drop a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. As usual, got me, John at MMA Fox, Luke at SWR_betting, and Lags at Danny_Lags. Good luck on your bets this weekend, and yeah, we'll see you next week. Take it easy, boys.